Hey friends, and welcome back to another episode of Entitled People. We got some more Reddit posts to check out today, so be sure to like and subscribe, and let's get into it, guys. The city wanted me to take better care of my gardens, so I had them approved by the local Nature Conservation Association. My house is surrounded by two gardens, one in the front facing the street and one in the back, bordering my neighbor's gardens. When my parents and grandparents moved into our house 26 years ago, they planted a thick hedge around the entire property. They also installed a rose arch over the pathways to our front door, and my grandfather was always busy keeping up the garden, planting, weeding, and keeping everything tidy. My grandfather died in 2002, and after that, the garden was neglected for a few years, as my parents were still working and my brother and I were in university and school. But then circa 2005, my mom read something that we should plant stuff to help the bees, and she took over the gardens, planting lilac, rhododendron, roses, and various berries. Later, we decided to also install raised garden beds, with various kitchen herbs. My mom is now over 70 years old, and has officially given the house over to my brother and me, so that we won't be taxed on inheriting it when she dies. Since then, I've been sporadically taking care of the gardens. I like them in their wild shape, with all the birds, bees, bumblebees, and butterflies flying around. In autumn, we get hedgehogs, and we've been visited by a fox recently, which sent my cats into a panic. Then recently, we received a letter from the city stating that our garden was interfering with the safety of the street because the hedge was overgrowing the pavement and contained poisonous berries, which were a danger to children. Now, my brother trims the hedge every month to make sure nothing is overgrowing the pavement in any way. And while the berries are poisonous, to get to them, you'd have to be quite resilient because they're surrounded by thorns. They are also known to be ideal food for some local birds. So I contacted our local Nature Conservation Association and asked if they would like to have a look at our gardens and maybe tell us if we could improve anything to make them even more nature-friendly. They came, looked around, and then told us they rarely see gardens so in touch with nature. They approved our gardens as especially nature-friendly and contacted the city to tell them that from their point of view, any changes would be considered unfriendly to nature. And since our city prides itself with once being one of the green capitals in our country, they had to budge. Don't mess with my gardens. Private property means private property. My husband, a 56-year-old male, and I, a 59-year-old female, live in a private community. There are two entrances to our tract. There are no gates, but both entrances are clearly posted with large private property / no trespassing signs. All of the streets in our tract are 100% maintained by our association dues, 0 tax dollars. Also, all of our streets are considered by the city to be fire lanes, so there is no parking allowed on the streets in our little community. The southern boundary of our community backs up to the football field of our local high school, where they hold commencement every spring. The problem is that there isn't really enough parking at the school for everyone who wants to attend the graduation ceremony. Parking is made available across the street from the football field, and all people have to do is walk down to the corner, cross at the light, and then walk back up to the entrance to the football field. But in spite of being warned about our community being private property and not available for graduation parking, some people insist on parking in our community so that they don't have to walk as far. The last time they held graduation, I came home for work and almost smashed into the back of a car illegally parked on the street as I came around the corner to my home. I'd had a bad day and that just set me off. I waited until I heard the commencement music start, then made 2 phone calls. First, I called the local PD and advised them that cars were parked in our fire lanes. The PD promptly came out and were happy to issue citations to every car that was illegally parked. My second call was to the security patrol company our association employs. They came out and arranged to have all of the illegally parked cars, there were 5 or 6 of them I recall, towed away. Guess there were a lot of unhappy people after the ceremony finished, when they came back to get their cars only to find that they had to go to the impound lot to get them back. Between towing, impound fees, and the fines for parking in the fire lanes, it probably ended up running over $500 per vehicle, just so they didn't have to walk across the street. Bridal party's failure to plan was somehow my fault. I had a part-time job doing valet parking at an upscale hotel adjacent to an event center. If there was something scheduled at the event center, we'd staff accordingly. We'd tell incoming guests that if they needed to leave at a specific time, to let us know or call down to the front desk ahead of time. If we knew a bunch of guests would be leaving at the same time, we'd start bringing their cars up early so they'd be good to go when the time came. I was working the morning shift one Saturday along with a guy in his 70s. He was a solid worker, but he couldn't run. I have an artificial hip and a bunch of pins and screws in the same leg. I can run, but I can't keep it up for long, and I pay for it later. We used the parking garage for the event center, which was close to a block away, and because of one-way streets, it was a 4-block drive, with stoplights, to bring a car back up. There was a large group of people who were in town for a wedding. They had about 20 cars among them. They just started showing up pretty much all at once, right when they needed to leave. Most of them realized that they had screwed up, but there was one entitled family that held us responsible. They just would not shut up, and it got worse and worse. The mom didn't say anything, but the dad and his 2 teenage daughters started out nasty and got worse and worse. That turned out to be my last day as a valet, because I snapped. I told them that it wasn't my fault that they were too stupid to let us know that they'd need all their cars ready at 8 in the morning, but we were doing our best to fix their screw-up. I said there were only 2 of us, and neither of us was an athlete or stunt driver, and that if we had the kind of power over space and time it would take to bring all those cars up with no advance notice, we wouldn't be here taking his crap. All 3 of them started yelling again when I ended my rant. I said, "Alright, I've had enough. I quit." I turned to the other people waiting and said, "Now it's going to take twice as long because these assholes don't know when to shut up." I turned back to the dad and said, "I feel I'm doing your daughters a disservice by not punching you in the mouth, but I know you'd be a little bitch and press charges." Epilogue. The father and daughters were all shouting at my back as I walked away. I sent the guy I was working with a text, telling him I was walking out, and apologizing for leaving him to deal with everything alone. When I turned in my uniform shirts, the boss told me it took almost 45 minutes to get the rest of the cars brought up. I have no idea how that impacted the wedding. My assumption is that it either started late or some of them missed the beginning. Trespassers get what they deserve. When I was a kid, a family friend purchased a new piece of property. He proceeded to carve into the pine forest to make his house lot, with plenty of more land under his name. He spent most of his time cutting trails across his property, due to the fact that pine forest is very dense. Now, he had a small pond on his property that was only accessible due to the trails he created. He even stocked it with bass, FYI not cheap, which he fed every few days. Now, a part to note is that he had chosen this property because it butted up against state land that he could connect to and make it to the nearest state park in about an hour. Not bad for retirement property. Though it turned into a double-edged sword. It turned out that one of the neighbor's kids thought that if there was a trail anywhere in the state, he was allowed full access. The trail had a locked gate and posted signs, so there was no way it could be confused for public land. It didn't take long for the kids to bypass the gate or cut the lock, and find their way to the lake, and fish it out completely. When he complained to the kid's father, the guy copped an attitude, and said his kid could do whatever. It should be noted that this guy was a World War II vet, and helped teach me how to shoot, so if he really wanted, that kid wouldn't have made it off the property. Instead, he got inventive. About 50 feet inside the property line, he dug a trench about 2 feet deep, and 1.5 feet across. I helped him line the bottom with grass, so that it had a little camouflage. Now, if you were just easing along, you could either avoid it, or go through it without any difficulty. But if you are a kid that thinks it is cool to destroy someone's property, then you would never see it coming. I still remember the smile on his face as he walked me over a week later, and we found a few ATV and dirt bike parts. Nothing too bad, just a few busted lights and part of a fender, but it was still funny as hell. Not nearly as funny as the sheriff pulling in with the kid, with his father behind him. He tried to get my family's friend arrested, at least until they were led to the area with the ditch. After that, the sheriff asked if he wanted to press charges, and he said, "Hell yes, I do." I was almost too young to understand what was going on, and why the kid was being put in the back of the sheriff's car in handcuffs. Though now, I think back and laugh. Just because you have a bike or quad does not give you any rights to other people's property. If they can't catch you, they can still get back at you for damaging their land. Coworker tried to claim my 15-page report as her own work to the CEO, got outed in front of him. This was a young woman who only got her job especially made for her because her dad was golfing buddies with our CEO. She regularly blamed her team for numerous mistakes and took all the credit for their hard work. Let's call her bitch. I used to do trade shows, and after the fall season would be back in the office and create a comprehensive report on the results of the show, normally 15 plus pages. The VIPs always wanted paper reports, not attachments, so I normally printed them out and distributed them personally to the staff. I handed bitch her copy as we passed in the corridor, then watched in sheer amazement as she marched straight into the CEO's office and said, I kid you not, "Here boss, I just put this together for you." Stunning. The report was all about trade shows, and she wasn't even in the same department. Cue the revenge. I marched in there right after her and said, "Oh bitch, I just realized that my report has some numerical errors. Let me have it back and I'll get you a revised one." All the while staring at the CEO with a slightly raised eyebrow. As I left, I heard the most wonderful words from the CEO. "OP, would you please close the door as you leave?" Bitch came out about 5 minutes later looking like a ripe tomato. I couldn't resist asking, "How was your little tete-a-tete with our boss?" Well guys, thank you for watching. Be sure to hit that like button, I'd really appreciate it. And even more so if you hit that subscribe button while you're at it. So I'm out of here, have an awesome day friends, and I'll see you all next time.